Hornet, the protector of Hallownest. Hornet is considered to be the final test before we can open up this game. Behind her lies the gateway, the key to the massive world beneath and around us. She stands as both a steep difficulty spike and the first properly unskippable, unavoidable boss fight. But how hard is she? Well, I'm glad you asked me, because I have a nifty little difficulty rating right here on screen. I've given her 2.5 of these bronze seals, which we can compare to the other bosses we've faced to see how she stacks up. Well, who made you the authority on difficulty, I hear you say? Isn't difficulty a purely subjective matter? Right you are, viewer who asks extremely pertinent questions. So I have to tell you, there is a lot more to these bronze seals than meets the eye. Behold! Math! Cower before its awful majesty! Don't worry, I don't want to waste anyone's time teaching algebra right now. All I'll say is that this is a formula I made to get as close as I could reasonably get to an objective measure of difficulty. I've condensed my notes on the matter onto the screen here. You can pause if you're super curious about it. But what makes Hornet here so much harder than the False Knight, eh? Well, unlike all our foes so far, it's not her size that makes her formidable, but her agility. She's even more quick and nimble than we are, and we're expected to beat her at her own game. There is one new mechanic to explain here first, though. She is the first boss who has what I'll call a proper stagger mechanic. We could stagger the False Knight, but the way he works is unique from everyone else. And the way it works for everyone else is, after landing a specific number of hits, the final hit will interrupt whatever the boss is doing, and cause them to pause in some sort of oof, ouch, hang on animation. They'll exit this state after a certain amount of time has passed, or immediately after taking any damage. Well, almost any damage. Don't worry about it. Generally speaking, the presence of a stagger mechanic makes bosses easier than they would be otherwise, since they give you time to heal or get some free damage, or both. In addition to that, there's also a combo mechanic. Hornet here, for example, takes 11 hits to stagger, but every time we hit her, an invisible timer starts ticking. This timer is different for every staggerable enemy, but Hornet's timer is 120 frames, or 2 seconds. If we land another hit before that time runs out, it will add a number to the combo counter and reset the timer. If we can get a combo chain of 6 hits, she'll stagger early. If we don't land a hit before the timer runs out, however, the combo chain will reset. Now, let's carry on to her attacks. Hornet's repertoire consists of an impressive 6 attacks. The Lunge. The Aerial Lunge. The Pearl Hurl. The Jumping Spider. The Gossamer Storm. And most dangerous of all, Walking Forwards. You think I'm joking. This is unironically the worst one. Now let's break them down. The lunge is as simple as it gets. After readying her nail, she'll dash forwards across the screen. Off the top of my head, I can think of about 5 other bosses who use this exact same attack, so get used to dodging it. As for now, your options are plentiful. Do anything that doesn't involve staying on the ground and you should be just fine. My personal favorite is to get in a little nail pogo on her head while she passes underneath, but just jumping past her does the trick too. The aerial lunge is quite a bit harder simply because of the variety of angles that it can come at you from. If the angle is really steep, it might be smart to cross underneath her on the ground, but generally, you'll want to go over the top of her. To give yourself the best means, remember that like most aerial attacks, she'll target the knight's current position, then launch forward, giving you a short window to put some distance between you and her trajectory. Whenever you see this attack begin, always begin moving away from her. This will make it harder to hit you and make her angle a little bit shallower, so it's easier to hop over her. Her third attack is the Pearl Hurl. She'll launch her nail at you like a projectile before revealing that she's got hold of a thread attached to it, and yanking it backwards on its path. This attack only has its surprise factor the first time. It's not like she has a different variety where she launches the nail without the thread. So just don't fall for the trick and hop over the nail on its way forwards and backwards. You can nail pogo off the needle if you need to. If you're close enough, you can also hop on her head behind her, giving you a lot of time to get a couple extra hits in. Next is the Jumping Spider, which is kind of an overtop name for the fact that it's just an actual jump. This is another one of those things you might prefer to classify as a behavior rather than an attack, since it's rarely something she actually uses to specifically target the knight, but rather just to reposition herself. However, if you're too close to her or moving too fast, you can absolutely get caught up by her hitbox here. So it's an attack to me. Since its telegraph is so small, the only thing you can reasonably do about it is just keep your distance before it becomes an issue. The Gossamer Storm is one you absolutely have to learn what the wind-up frames look like in order to know it's coming, since the actual attack is so visually subtle compared to practically everything else. Move away from her as soon as you see her get into this position. She'll whip her razor-sharp thread around her in a crazed circle. There are no blind spots, so you're not going to hit her through that with your nail. She'll usually jump before suspending herself in midair to perform this attack, but sometimes she'll just do it on the ground. Either way, this is a fantastic time to use our newest ability, the Vengeful Spirit. With good positioning and timing, you can nail her 2 or even 3 times in a row. Now, her final attack, walking forward, is indeed the most dangerous. Generally speaking, she won't do this if the knight is close enough that she'd hit them with it, but generally speaking isn't always. And worse than that, there's nothing to stop her from walking into a place that you're moving towards. It has virtually no telegraph, can be done at any time while on the ground, and in either direction, and yes, I'm being dead serious right now. This attack has lost me more attempts at this fight than anything else she can do. Much like her jump, the only thing to do about it is to simply give her space in between attacks. If you're focused on sticking inside her personal bubble, you'll probably end up getting hit by this one. Now, with a foe as nimble as Hornet, you definitely need a strategy. So here's what I recommend. Our neutral position in this fight is going to be planted at the dead center of the arena. Hornet prefers to move to one side and strike through the center when she's attacking, so we're going to wait in the center and let her come to us. Every time she jumps, treat it as though she's doing her aerial lunge attack, as that's what's going to be the most dangerous to us while we're at center stage. So that means move away from her every time you see her take to the air. Her jumping spider attack is usually too short range to threaten you this way. Likewise, she can use her Gossamer Storm to position to the other side of you, but its windup is long enough that you can easily react and move to safety. If at any point Hornet sets herself up at center stage, just move aside until she relocates. It won't be long. Most importantly, give her space in between attacks, so she can't surprise you with her walk, jump, or grounded Gossamer Storm. Let her come to you and get your shots in as she passes. Her Pearl Hurl is also a good time to get in some hits since it takes so long. Feel free to pursue her to the side of the arena while she's performing this one. Just remember to always return to center stage. Lastly, I only recommend healing when she's staggered or using Gossamer Storm. Alright my friends, it's time to either get beaten or...
Get the...
Ooh, but Hornet! She's always been a tough foe, and this iteration of her has 900, but... still definitely feels like a downgrade from the fact that we've fought the Sentinel by this point. Most likely, of course. It is possible to reach this point before doing a lot of things. This fight is much, much easier. We have access to a lot more range. We have, of course, the Shade Cloak, common pattern. We have a lot of easy answers to many of the things she can do. And that's her down. Now, in this form, she has 1,250 health, which is an awful lot. And that ends up being the biggest issue with most of the Ascended and Radiant bosses. It's not really about how well you know the attacks, but how well do you know the attacks repeatedly. These fights can take a long time, or at least it can definitely feel like a long time when you're in the fight itself, you're in the moment. So, in order to bridge that gap, I highly recommend Strength. There's almost no reason not to use it. And in combination with having the most powerful nail, it is going to make all of these bosses quite a bit shorter. Now feel free to be just as careful as we once were when we are facing off against Hornet on Radiant. Because even though she's still an early game boss, she is still very quick and nimble compared to most of the bosses in this game. Walking forwards as ever remains the most dangerous tactic in her tool belt. Okay, hold on, it's me in editing. I just noticed something while I was watching this back. Did you see that? Could not do that again if I tried. Okay, moving on. Luckily, her stagger stats are remarkably high. I should be nail arting more against the stagger, but... that's alright. Maybe only cost me a couple seconds.
Hey, thanks for watching Boss Blitz. For literally any Hollow Knight challenge that's not related to bosses, check out the playlist on the left. Next up, we're gonna scale things down a bit and head after the massive Moss Charger.